the value of the goal is to inform the plan, right? And so we set this goal and you figure out based on the goal, like what are the things I need to do to accomplish it? And then we don't need the goal anymore, right? Because we have the plan and we know the direction that we're going, but the goal serves a very good purpose of like, before we start on a thing, let's make sure we're all pointed in the same direction and we have a good idea about how we're going to go from A to B.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to Something for Everybody. My name is Aaron Machbitz. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks, sir. It's great to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone.
My first and most important question is, how are you doing? Like, actually, for real, how are you doing?
You don't want the hallway? Like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, it would make for an awkward chat if you wanted to do that. But
we'll do the one-word answer podcast and see how quickly I can drop your audience. I think like my usual answer is great with some kind of qualification of that, because usually that is how I'm feeling. This morning, I think I picked something up from, I've got a young son in daycare. So woke up this morning with a bit of a something, who knows what. So physically, like not a 10, but I've been looking forward to this chat for a while, having like read your story a little bit and seen some stuff you're up to. So the emotional side's making up for it. We're just a bit fuzzy around the edges today.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. The first question around sort of the work you're doing outside of my actual first question is, if there was one lesson from your book that you wanted your kids to take with you for the rest of their life, what would it be?
Oh, why don't you just start by like whipping me out a fastball rather than like that my kids would take away? I think it would be around intentionality. There's a lot in the book about different ways of thinking about being intentional and how, you can't predict what's going to happen, and you don't have a lot of control in a lot of ways that you might think you do to get an outcome that you want. What we do have a lot of control over is are the activities we choose to do and the way in which we hold ourselves while we do them. So if you could be really intentional about, what am I doing? Why am I doing these things? What things am I not doing because I'm making these choices? And if you feel good about those choices in the moment, the path is going to be great. It's when you wind up on a path you don't want to be on because you've been under intentional about choosing the things you're doing day to day. So maybe it would be that one.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one. Especially for kids nowadays growing up with seeming like so many different options and what social media is giving them. Like if this path is what you really want, regardless of maybe what other people are doing, if you're intentional about it, I think it's extremely valuable. At least that's how it was in my, at least in my sports career, right? If I wanted to be a college athlete, I had to sacrifice a few things, and you have to sort of accept the price of those goals. If you're not willing to, that's okay. There's going to be something that you can be intentional about with your time. And I think that's a valuable lesson, falls right into productivity and how you prioritize your time and what's most important to you. And so is there anything that you changed your mind on while trying to research for this book?
Yes. In a lot of ways, the book is like, here are all the ways my mind changed. And I think, even the statement there, like researched the book, it's more like my life was the research for the book. It was a lived experience that I had that led to a lot of the lessons I learned. And kind of as I was learning these lessons and employing them in my life, I started to then research, like, why is this thing working in a way I wasn't expecting? But it's probably not an overstatement to say that the lessons I learned that made it into the book kind of came at the expense of, or as a result of, flipping over all of the core assumptions I had about how I think about living my life, specifically related to work, like what success means to me, the way I'm supposed to work, how I'm supposed to think about that. In a lot of ways, a lot of it was like unlearning things that were, kind of just, I absorbed over the years, kind of unlearning them and realizing you don't have to work this way. There are different ways to work. There are, better ways to think about being productive and be thinking about your performance. And it would have been great to learn those lessons sooner. And I hope the book does that for folks.
What were some of those core assumptions that were really hard to break?
I think there's so many of them. Goal setting is a big one, and it's hard because there's such a rhetoric out there, and I was always thinking about what's the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan. If you don't set big goals, you can't accomplish anything. That the accomplishment of goals is kind of the way to measure happiness and success, and that just hasn't panned out for me. And I think if you look at a lot of the research, it is pretty suggestive that it's also not the best way to be, the happiest, best version of yourself over time. Because like I said, you can't control the outcome, right? You can set all the goals on the planet. You could do an incredible job working towards those goals, and something completely out of your control can happen and you can miss the goal. And so should you feel good about that or bad about that? Alternatively, you can hit a goal. And if folks are anything like me, I consider myself to be a relatively high achiever. I hit a goal and I have like a spike for, I don't know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe it's half an hour or a day if it was a really big milestone. And immediately I'm on to like, what's the next one? How am I going to get to the next thing? What's the next thing I'm going to do? Just always being in that chase mindset. I've learned I don't need the goals to provide the motivation to me, and I don't need the goals to help me accomplish the big things I'm trying to accomplish in my life. So that was probably a big one, and it's unconventional.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about goals, and it's just like interesting because I coach a sports team, and obviously the goal of every season is to win a championship or win as many tournaments as possible. But how frequently should we talk about that goal? Like for me, I like to say at the beginning of the season, hey guys, we know that our goal is to try to win every baseball game, and then never talk about it again. And some kids are just not used to that because they're like, why isn't coach talking about winning all the time? Is winning not important? So even trying to just break that little habit, I'm like just like you said, there's so many things that go into just a 1-2 hour baseball game that is outside of my control. Like we hit 8 balls hard, they all got caught. Umpire screwed us here. The weather, what a yada yada yada. And it's like if our only focus is we have to win, but we still played a great baseball game, what does that show to the kids on the field? Then you get into this like performance-based identity and all that stuff that's sort of wrapped up in the goals that we achieve. So I've tried to, at least in my own life, change goals with targets. And so, okay, I'm just trying to head in this direction. That's my target. And if I keep going in that direction, maybe something will work out in my favor. But I know that if I do these things right that are in my control, then my target is probably a little closer than if I wasn't doing this thing. And that for me has at least helped in terms of like not being so obsessed with the outcome, because like you and I grew up around the same time. It was all just about grind, 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 grind. You got to grind, work harder. If you're not working harder, you're a fucking pussy. If you're sleeping, if you're sleeping more than 8 hours, you're just the worst person that's ever, like all this shit. And like some of it has some merit, as you know, like you can't build businesses or have startups or be successful if you're not working hard. But there can be another way, which is why I'm very much enjoying the work that you're putting out and trying to make these like really tangible distinctions about how we can enjoy the work we're actually doing while also still progressing faster.
Yeah, I think if you haven't read The Score Takes Care of Itself, you might really like it. Written by a football coach. It's all about the mentality you described, specifically related to sports. If you take care of the little things, then the score will take care of itself in the game. And I think, again, maybe it'd be interesting to kind of push you on this thought, but it's funny. In business, there's a lot of times when we use sports analogies, and I'm of the opinion that they don't fit very well. The thing that goes on in sports that I think doesn't happen in business is sports is a zero-sum game. There is only one winner. That's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a relatively well-defined path to get there, wins and losses. Right. And there are many ways to accomplish your wins and losses. But at the end of the day, the path reduces down to a simple, did you win? Did you lose? We can't both win and lose. There has to be a winner.
Right.
Business life, in my experience, is not like that. When I really started shifting my mindset towards, for me to win doesn't mean that Aaron has to lose. Right. I can win and Aaron can win. And if I find a situation where Aaron and I win together, we the high tide floats all boats. and getting out of this, mentality of zero sum, meaning there's only so much pie to be eaten and I have to get my fill of it as fast as I can, rather than just bake a bigger pie, and uh, that for me is like, I find sometimes people come into the space and it takes a bit of a shift in your mindset to say, actually, like, some of these rules that feel like they make sense, that feel like they apply, they don't, right? Like in sports, you break the rules, you cheat, you're kicked out. In life, I'm not saying that you should, break laws, but if you find a better way of getting a job done, that's just called smart, and you can change the rules of the game so long as you're not, violating a law, your moral code or what have you. But finding ways, like you said, to like, what's a better way to approach this thing? How do I accomplish this in a totally different way? For me, was what the big unlock was, because I was big into the belief of, the grind mentality of, I there is no way to accomplish a lot and enjoy it too. I'm going to work really hard and accomplish a lot so that I can enjoy it when I get there. Right. And I think that, I had an experience in my life where just I learned that you don't know whether there is going to be a there. And even when you do get there, are you really going to stop at that time? So how do you actually enjoy the journey, which is a common platitude, but it was not something I knew what to do with. Like, of course I want to enjoy it, but how can I enjoy it and accomplish these big, ambitious goals that I have for myself?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just like thinking about the both and I think the platitudes are there for a reason. Like, you should enjoy the journey, but like you're saying, most people aren't explaining how I should do that. They're saying just, work longer hours, and then when you work longer hours, you'll get paid more, and then eventually you can use that money to enjoy the journey after you're done working. Like, but it all can happen. Like, my life is right now. Like, I don't want to not enjoy this part of my life now, because work can be an enjoyable space. Now, I think if you just outright are absolutely 100% miserable at your job, that's like maybe a different experience. But like, if there's always going to be things in your job that you can enjoy, that you can make better, that you can split, switch your perspective on. And one of the things I really like about what you're talking about is, like, especially on social media, there's like this really big push for being an entrepreneur. Everyone's just like, yo, if your job sucks, just quit it and then just like go be an entrepreneur. Like, one, like, as you know, it's like really freaking hard to be an entrepreneur. And your frame of mind is like, well, let's take a step back. Like, why don't we think about the job that we do have? How can we make it more enjoyable right now? And then maybe still, if I want to become an entrepreneur, that's possible. But what about me in the present moment? How can I make that better? And so, what can you tell us about that, and maybe sort of the frustrating tasks that happen at work? How can we make those more enjoyable, and some insight on that?
Yeah, I think, and this is, you asked earlier, like some stuff that kind of flipped upside down for me is you kind of look at it and you realize a lot of times we make assumptions that it's an environmental thing that's a problem, meaning what's going on around us, right? My job isn't good. I need to get a promotion or get on a different project, or get into a new job entirely. And I'm not trying to say that those things are not potentially true. Just that, like, usually the achievement based, the environment based stuff is not the answer as frequently as we think it's the answer. There's a lot more that we can do where we are. And so the challenges I started to see, as I was working with folks, is, you have something that's not going well in the job that you're in, and you jump to a new job, and you have like a honeymoon phase, right? It lasts like a month or 2 months or 6 months if you're lucky, maybe even a little bit longer. But eventually, because you haven't changed the way that you're working, a lot of the frustrations that used to exist for you, they just come back. Mm. Right? And because you haven't addressed the way that you're working, you wind up feeling the same way no matter what job you're in. And so what I try to recommend for folks, and what I'm, putting forward in the book, is actually the job that you have can be your dream job. I don't believe that a dream job is something you find. There's that platitude, like, find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. It's never happened to me. I've done a lot of different jobs, and I talk to people. It's like, maybe you win the lottery. I don't know. But I think a dream job is not something that you acquire or something that you get. It's something that you practice. Mm. And nobody really explains how to practice, to go back to the sports analogy. Like, I don't know how to get into the batting cage, for the kinds of things that I see going on at work. And I don't know how to practice to, have my job get better. And so what I've outlined in the book is 9 of the most common frustrations, slowdowns, challenges that we all face at work, and how to solve them with a really simple tactic. And the benefit here is, the one thing I feel great about saying is if you try all 9 of these, and I tried to make them so simple that, like, if you can talk or you can type, you can try every tactic in the book. You don't need new skills. Like, you can use what you already have right now. If you try all 9 of these tactics and 0 of them work, and you still don't like your job, that is a great sign that it's environmental, right? And what I'm trying to get people to do is kind of flip the script on the head and say, great, I need a change. Let me start with me. I'm going to try to improve these things about the way that I'm working. If I don't see my environment changing around me, then I know it's time to move, right? But jumping to a new job, you actually might be in a way better job than you think you are, and you only realize that. And I was reading an article from a guy that just yesterday, he jumped to a job, he was getting paid double. And 6 months later, he regrets it because he turns out he really liked where he was, and he didn't realize that until he wound up elsewhere. And this is a trend repeated everywhere. Like, the Great Resignation is this big thing. Everybody talked about it. Research now is 80% of people that change their jobs regret it. And
really?
So I'm saying, hey, yeah, like, here are some tools that you can try to make sure that it's time to change. So if you're in a toxic work environment, it's time to make a change. Like, for sure. I'm not trying to downplay those. But it's much easier to improve a situation that you're in than it is to go find something new with the expectation that it's just magically somehow going to be better.
Yeah, 80%. Wow. Why is there a reason why, or why do you think that is? 80% of people regret their switch.
I'm sure it varies, but I think a lot of it is just shiny new object, idea of, like, again, I don't believe. I choose to subscribe to the belief that there are a lot of things I can do. If you tell me my situation's no good, I'm going to think about what am I doing? What are my actions that's contributing to this? What can I do differently that might change it? I think assuming that it's an external change that's going to fix all my problems is a challenging way of thinking. And it's not to say that an external change isn't sometimes needed. It's just like, what's the playbook for figuring out whether or not the external change is needed? And the benefit is, if I get to improve myself while I'm figuring that out, then if I do decide it's time to go somewhere new, I'll be all the better for it. And I'll be less likely to be one of the 80% that wind up regretting it later. It's just the, like, oversimplified assumption of, I don't like where I'm at, this new place will be better. But if you work the same and have the same bad habits and, have all the same inefficiencies, like, unless you were in a toxic environment, why is that new situation going to be that much better for you?
Yeah, I guess that's why you titled the book "Your Grass Is Greener."
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's great. Because I was listening to another podcast you did on Beyond the To-Do List about maybe you did it like a year ago, and you had a different title for the book.
That's right.
And it was like before I got super deep into your research, and I was like, oh, like, did he write another book? I need to look at that one before I look at this one. And then I realized, as very slow learner that I am, that it was all the same process. But when did you switch to that title, Your Grass is Greener? Because it's a great title.
Deep in the archives. Good for you. Thanks for figuring that one out. The title was, if you're ever going to write a book, advice to folks. And I got a lot of advice about book writing because it's something I've never done before, where people are like, oh, we're going to talk to an author today. I'm like looking behind me for, like, who the hell are they talking about? Like, I don't know who the author is here. Lots of advice. If I could distill it down to one thing, it's don't name your book before you publish it. That's the mistake I made. Is, I had this working title for the book, and as I was writing the book evolved. And as the book evolved, it drifted further and further and further from the title. The concept was similar, but it was drifting from the title. And as the book was getting closer and closer and closer to getting published, we started thinking about, okay, how's this thing going to go out in the world? And it's like, well, what is this book about? And it was way easier to see from the end looking back. What's the message I'm trying to get across here with all the things that are in the book, to figure out what title we thought fit best. But I'll tell you, man, picking a title is like, hard. It's hard. I mean, we went through hundreds and hundreds, and like asking people's opinions, doing poll, like, it's really tough. And because you have the old book title in your head, it makes it harder to think about what actually fits best. But the change was maybe 6 months ago, and it felt like it clicked in. I was like, oh yeah, this is it. We're running with this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because now it's out in the world for forever. Um,
They actually,
and
my publisher asked me like, "Are you sure you want to be the greener grass guy?" I was like, I don't know. Ask me that question in 5 or 10 years. But like, that's what the book is fundamentally about. Is like, you could look in your neighbor's yard all day long and see that their grass is greener. I'm telling you, your grass is greener like where you are right now.
yeah,
There's just some tactics that, for whatever reason, don't seem to be out there in the world. And I learned them through just brute force experimentation. Like I said, there's 9 in the book. There's about 150 that didn't make the cut because I tried them and they failed miserably for me. But these 9 are all about like, this is how to improve the situation that you're in without requiring some deep, crazy, you know, professional development or learning and development or anything like that. Like, just take where you're at and make some small changes, and you can see a massive, massive impact.
yeah. Is there any funny stories you have from the experiments that didn't go so well?
Tons. I mean, I'm so lucky that I worked around a great team. At the time, there was a whole bunch of like, I went Tim Ferriss on, like life experiments and life hacks and things like that, which, we could talk about if the life side's more interesting. But then I kind of shifted and applied it to work, which in retrospect was so unbelievably obvious. But in the moment, I didn't understand it. I was doing all these life hacks and I was feeling better and better and better, but I plateaued. And I was just like, oh, shoot, like, why have I plateaued? Is this just as good as it's going to get? What the heck? And then a light bulb went off and I was like, well, I'm putting all my energy into life. What about work, which is, other than sleep, the single biggest activity that I am going to do over the course of my life, And I started applying the hacks to work. What are the different experiments I could run here? Read every book I could on like neuroscience, productivity, like you name it. Someone has said you could be more productive, enjoy your job more, progress faster, whatever. Like I've probably tried it in some way, shape, or form. A lot of them are challenging. Goal setting is one that we talked about. I tried running a team, so I was building a startup at the time. Team was growing really fast, and I was like, let's try not setting goals for the whole company. Let's see what happens. Let's not set goals for this team. Let's set way more goals. Turns out, like, yeah, I don't like setting 5-year goals. Goals have a very important purpose in my mind. It's just different than I think how we often think about them. When I didn't set any goals and the team didn't have any goals, things kind of went upside down, as you would expect they would. Just like, well, what are we trying to do? And everyone's like, zipping around all over the place. The value of the goal is to inform the plan, right? And so we set this goal and you figure out based on the goal, like, what are the things I need to do to accomplish it? And then we don't need the goal anymore, right? Because we have the plan and we know the direction that we're going, but the goal serves a very good purpose of like, before we start on a thing, let's make sure we're all pointed in the same direction and we have a good idea about how we're going to go from A to B. So that one blew up and people were really, not so happy with me because of the operational upheaval I created. But, you got to break a few eggs to figure some of these things out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the goal side, just having a shared vision. So everyone's, nose and toes are headed in the same direction. I mean, Nick Saban, the former coach of Alabama, talks about this all the time. And so did Pete Carroll, Seattle Seahawks coach. They're like, that's where I took it from for coaching my team. They're like, yeah, our goal is to win a national championship. Our goal is to win a Super Bowl. That's our shared vision. We're never going to talk about it again. Let's get to work.
Yeah.
And for me, that makes sense.
I think a lot about priorities. That's what came out of this for me was, the idea of, okay, where are we going, right? We've got some kind of a shared mission. And then for some subset of time in business, we often use a quarter. For a sports team, it could be, the season. It could be shorter, longer, who knows? But what I like to do is I like to say, okay, great. We're trying to go from here to there. Now, what are the activities that we're going to disproportionately prioritize? Because there are hundreds of things, thousands, infinitely many ways to accomplish any given goal. And this is when I find we get really misaligned is, everyone's trying to accomplish the goal in the way that they think is best. And we wind up banging into each other and not all pushing in one direction. But when you can define priorities and say, hey, the way that we're going to get here is we're going to improve marketing in this way, and we're going to improve our product in that way. And now we know together that like these set of 2, 3, 4, 5 activities, initiatives are disproportionately more important. That's where we're going to put our energy. That to me is the strategy. And that's the thing that really helps us get tightly aligned around, okay, how are we all going to move together towards this piece? And so I took a lot of the energy I put towards goal setting. And instead of trying to get a perfect goal with exactly the right metric and it's smart and measurable and the OKRs and the whatever you want to use to like ladder it all down, instead, can we be very, very clear about the small set of priorities that we have and then trust everyone to like, yeah, we can now figure this out together. And I want people's diverse thinking against those priorities, as long as we all know these are our priorities and they haven't changed and we're all pushing in the same direction. So I shifted a lot of my energy from goal setting to really, really clear prioritization.
And then that's as a company or as a team, are you encouraging people on an individual level to do that as well, to prioritize their big three, their top three, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. Like I'll think about what that looks like right down to the level of a week. And I'm sure you read it quickly in the book there, but one of the things I learned from going through all the productivity hacks, surprisingly, is the one of the best ways I learned to help me get more done is to clarify what I'm not going to do.
Mm.
And so one of the best tips I have for folks is, if you're trying to get more done in a week, write a not to-do list. The reason why this is so helpful is because to-do lists are crazy overwhelming, right? If you're like most people, you probably have a to-do list that's 1,000 items long and you finish one thing and 6 more things go on it. And it's this like never ending thing. So first of all, it doesn't feel good. You work your ass off all week and you look at your to-do list and it's probably bigger at the end of the week than it was at the start of the week. And you don't feel the best. But if we put that aside, when you have like 100 things, 1,000 things, whatever the number is, 20 things on your to-do list, distractions are easy because you can justify working on almost anything at any time because it will connect to something that is technically on your to-do list. The challenge with distractions, I find, is they're very context dependent, right? So answering email in a meeting is a thing people think about. Is that a good thing to do or a bad thing to do? Right? If the meeting's important and you're sitting there hacking away at email, you're not being very respectful of the person who's there, and it's probably not the best choice. What if an email comes across your desk that is like, the product just exploded, you're the only person at the company that can fix the damn thing, we need you immediately? That's a good time to say, hey guys, I got to jump out of this for a sec. Something has come up here. So it's very context dependent. What I like about having a not to do list is, before the week starts, I say, what are the few big bets I'm going to make this week? 1, 2, 3 things maximum. And I'm going to push a smaller number of things substantially further forward. And I take everything else and I put it on my not to do list. And what this does for me is it says, yes, these things are important, but not right now. And so in the moment of the week, when the week comes at me and everything's changing, because it always does, the plan shifts around, what I've done is I have a framework that is already in place that I just need to react to, right? Aaron comes to my desk and says, Jay, I need your help with this thing. I don't need to say to him, get away from me, man. I can only focus on these 3 things. I could take a second and say, is Aaron's thing related to one of my 3 things? Yes or no? If yes, of course I'm doing it. If no, hang on a sec. Is Aaron's thing on my not to-do list? It is. Okay. In that situation, now I have to figure out a way to say no, which in my opinion is like the single hardest part of prioritization. I think productivity is psychological. It's much more about, can you actually say no to another human being? Which for me and many folks, I believe it's really hard to say, no, I'm not going to help you with that.
Yeah. How have you gotten better at saying no? Because I'm not great at it.
Yeah, don't. That's the answer. Is don't. A lot of these things that are hard and we try to figure our way around it, I think we make it too hard for ourselves. What I recommend people do instead is, instead of saying no to someone, ask them what they think. And ask them what they think about your priorities. This is why you want to have the 3 priorities in your not to-do list. So Aaron comes to my desk in that same situation and he's like, hey, Jay, can I get your help on this thing? Is it in my top 3? Nope. Is it on my not to-do list? Yep. I could try and say, sorry, Aaron, not doing it. Feels like shit. Aaron maybe doesn't want to work with me again. I'm not being the best team player, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No is tough. Instead, hey, Aaron, I'm prioritizing A, B, and C right now. I think those things are more important for me to work on than the thing that you're bringing me. What do you think?
Mm.
And in that situation, having practiced this a lot and, been the asshole so that you don't have to be and see whether it works or not, what I can tell you is the vast majority of times, Aaron says no to himself. Oh, Jay, I didn't realize you were on those things. Those things need to be done. They're more important than this thing I'm bringing you. I'm going to go find another way. Beautiful. That's the
Yeah.
vast majority of times. In the other cases, Aaron's going to make his case about like, no, I think this really needs to be on here and here's why. And we can talk about it. And great. There's nothing wrong with changing your priorities throughout the week. Just like we talked about at the top of the call, do it on purpose with intent, right? Aaron's making his case. This does feel like it's the right thing to go. I'm going to take one of my top priorities down. I'm going to put his in. And that just kind of helps you be a lot more intentional, and it helps you keep focused on your priorities, even if they change, because you're changing them on purpose if they need to change. And when someone's coming to you with something, you don't have to say no to them and be the jerk. You can bring them in and ask them for feedback on your priority list, but you need to have it clear in order to ask somebody, hey, what do you think of these priorities and how it maps to this thing that you're asking me to help with?
Yeah. That's brilliant. I mean, that's just like really, really solid, good communication, which is hard for most people, especially in the workplace when, things are moving around and people misunderstand things, even though you said it with the right words that you wanted to say it with and, all of that stuff. But I want to touch on communication a bit more, but I want to also go first ask you about what you found out about multitasking and what we can tell people about some of the research you found.
Yeah, I mean, lots of stuff to talk about as it relates to multitasking. I'm going to guess you're thinking about one part of the book, but I think we all seem to have this in-ground belief that we can multitask. It's like a badge of honor, and you just can't stop trying. So you asked about research for the book. I learned about some stuff when I was working on the chapter, which is all about how to prioritize better and actually get your own work done over the course of the week, so it feels good and you are more impactful. So I went to do a bunch of research and say like, okay, the myth of multitasking. Like, I basically found that the studies have shown very, very clearly that a very, very small percentage of humans are capable of multitasking, truly doing two things at the same time. And I hesitate to say this stuff because I say it and immediately everybody's brain goes to, yeah, I'm in that top point whatever percent. That's me, right? Like, that's, I think, the Dunning-Kruger effect that we all think we're the best at the thing. When I say multitasking, what I mean is like, I found a woman in Asia, okay? She can write 4 things, both hands, both feet, writing at the same time in 4 different languages simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
That woman is multitasking.
Yeah.
Okay? That is insane.
Wow.
She is fundamentally somehow splitting her brain and doing 4 things at the same time. Okay? She is a anomaly. I am not her. I cannot do that. If I try to talk to you and write something at the same time, I will start saying the thing I'm writing or writing the thing I'm saying. Like, I cannot even break my mind in that way.
Yeah.
And it gets way worse than that because there's habits that we all have that we just don't really realize. Okay, so most people will have their Slack or chat or email open while they're working. Okay, so this is a form of multitasking. And the immediate pushback I get from folks is, but I'm not answering them. It's just there.
Mm-hmm.
This is how much our brains suck at this. Okay, having messages open while you're working, even if you're not responding to them, just the fact that your brain knows that there's this thread zipping around next to you somewhere is enough to drop your IQ by twice the impact of smoking pot. And you probably wouldn't show up to work high, I assume.
You never know.
Yeah, I assume. No judgment, but depends on your job, I guess. This is twice as bad.
Wow.
Okay, it's equivalent to pulling an all-nighter and showing up in the office. You're dumber because your brain is just keeping track of the fact that there's something else happening over here, and the cognitive overhead of that just makes it harder. And you can still feel like, hey, I'm one of the people in that upper echelon. That's cool. Maybe you are. If you want to run a test, get 2 pieces of paper and see if you can write 2 things at the same time. I don't know, but the thing that works better for me is to just recognize, yeah, I'm not in that top whatever percent of folks that fundamentally can multitask. I'm just going to stop. And one of the best techniques that I learned from I was at Airbnb in the earlier days, and really great to be on kind of the up and to the right there. And Brian Chesky, the CEO there, he has an amazing productivity approach, and I love it. Ripped it off, give him credit. The idea is you take your to-do list, you write down, in my version, the three things, right? But you get whatever your to-do list looks like. And instead of saying I'm going to do these two things at the same time simultaneously, you look for a way to link your tasks. Is there a thing I can do that will accomplish progress on multiple things on my list at the same time? Example, I have to promote my book and I really love meeting new people. Let's just assume those two things were like at the top of my list for this week. I'm talking to Aaron. I am only doing one thing right now, and that's talking to Aaron. But talking to Aaron accomplishes multiple things potentially on my list. It lets me meet somebody new. It gives me a chance to talk about the book. I'm hoping that people listening to this will take something tactically away, which means it gets to help them in their lives, which is very impactful for me as well. It's checking multiple boxes for me, but I'm not having to write 4 different languages at the same time.
Yeah.
I just do this one thing, and it has a halo effect on more than one thing that I'm working on. And that for me was a big shifter, when it's like, look at a to-do list and think about, hey, there's one thing I could do here. It'll hit 3 or 4 things on my really long to-do list. If I do this one thing, I get this bonus across all of them. For sure, this is a top priority for me to get done this week.
Yeah. That makes me think about this research I read about connection with other people. Like if me and you are out having lunch and our phone is face down on the table or even just in our pocket, we're not using it, it decreases the connection that me and you have just from it being face down on the table or being in my pocket. Because one, if it's on the table, obviously I can see it. So I'm like, kind of like, but it's face down, so I can't see the notifications. But if it's in my pocket, I'm like, I can feel it. Like I know it's there. And so I wear a fanny pack everywhere. So I usually try to keep my phone in my fanny pack. So that helps a little bit. But it's interesting, like it just being sort of in the vicinity of you will decrease the connection that you and I have. I mean, that's why frankly, why I love the podcast. If no one ever listened, I very rarely get 1 hour of time uninterrupted with someone. Like I'm not doing anything right now except looking at you and thinking about you and hearing you talk. Amazing. Like very rarely do I get that. What?
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, no, it's
totally
fucking cool. But like we have to curate that time in our lives. I had to be intentional. Like this is like episode 295 of the podcast.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, it's really, really freaking cool. But like no one was listening for a while except my mom. So I was literally just doing these conversations because I enjoy doing them. It's the exact same thing now, but there's so much other, like you're saying, linked things that I'm getting from this that I didn't ever anticipate when I started this. And so that's such a valuable point about, that to-do list. And I guess that's why Airbnb is successful, because they got a great CEO, I guess.
Lots of reasons, but I think that one always kind of stuck out to me, is like, accept the fact that you can't multitask. Here are some things you can do with that paradigm, like in your head. I can't do 2 things at once, but I can do one thing that accomplishes multiple things. That's a nuance, but that nuance is of like critical importance.
What have you learned about communication at work and how we can be better at it?
Yeah, this one again too is so funny. It's like a lot of the stuff I assumed, like I said, I went very Tim Ferriss, on life and in work. And I assumed that it's kind of where the title of the book comes from. I had assumed that it was getting new stuff that would improve my situation. Some big, gigantic new skill, a new project, a new team, a new job, a promotion, whatever. I assumed that stuff, new stuff, was going to make me do and feel better at work. Because I did all these experiments and I tracked them all, and I have this crazy Excel spreadsheet of like every 2-3 weeks running experiments and looking back, what I found looking back is actually removing stuff, things that got things out of my way, impediments, had by far and away the biggest impact on how I was feeling and on my performance. Communication is one of these. Miscommunications are one of the most frustrating things that can happen at the office. It's something like 70% of people can point to a very specific, very recent miscommunication that left them feeling like more anxious, more stressed, or whatever it might be. Something like 1 in 4 people are thinking about getting a new job because of miscommunications that happen in the office. So it's a huge pain in the ass, right? And this is like the kind of thing where you and I are working on a project, we get together, we talk about what we need to do, right? I go away and work on it. I don't realize that we had a miscommunication. I only figure that out when we get back together the next week and we look at the work that I did and you're like, oh, geez, this was not what I thought we were trying to do. And we had some miscommunication. I can't go back and get that time back. It's very, 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 very frustrating. And so the question here is like, well, what's going on? And there's a really funny realization I had is that we're all taught about miscommunications. We just don't do anything about it. And that's broken telephone. Right? Almost everybody has played this in school. You line up kids, you tell the first kid a thing, that kid whispers it to the next kid, down the line. The last kid says the thing, everybody bursts out laughing because it sounds nothing like how it started. Okay? The teacher has a big, huge laugh. Oh, this is so funny. Haha, it's great. So we teach kids, we suck at communicating with each other. And then everyone says, okay, cool, we're good. See you tomorrow. Like nobody ever says, by the way, this is something you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. Why don't we show you how to close that gap?
Yeah.
And it turns out the gap is massive. So if you look into it, there are some studies that show that in the US alone, they waste $1.2 trillion due to workplace miscommunications.
Trillion, like with a T?
With a T.
Oh.
Mind-bogglingly large number.
Holy shit.
There are 16 countries on this planet whose economies produce more than $1.2 trillion every year, their GDP. Every other country is producing less than the US is wasting because of miscommunications happening in the office.
Wow.
Big problem. Okay, so you look at that and you're like, oh, this is a big, giant problem, right? But like 1.2 trillion is such a big number. Like my brain can't think about, how much money is that? Like, what would that look like in a room? I don't know what to do with that. So you do the math, which is fun to do. And what that works out to is 1 full day of lost productivity for every single employee in the US every single week. That's the cost of miscommunication to us. Okay? And so you hear all this stuff about 4-day work weeks and you think, I couldn't possibly do that. If you can get rid of miscommunications for you at work, you can gain back an entire day of productivity. So how do we get rid of that? That's the question.
Yeah.
Right? Seems nice, great. Miscommunications are a problem. I have to go and become an expert in communication to solve this problem. False. Okay, you look around and there are some professions where there can be no miscommunications. The cost of a miscommunication is, incredibly, incredibly bad. Someone's going to lose their life, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. Soldiers, doctors, high voltage power supply folks, in these kinds of situations, of course, there's still human error that happens, but they have to find a way to get rid of miscommunications. And I stumbled on this technique called a brief back, which is something that the Army uses. And it's very, very simple. All that it is a listener repeating back whatever they just heard from somebody. So simple.
Yeah.
Why does this work? Because we are two completely different people. And the way I interpret things is different than the way you might mean for me to interpret those things. And there's this like fundamental assumption we have about communication that I think is not true. And that's that great communication ends when words leave my mouth, right? Or my thumbs if I'm typing you a message, or my keyboard or whatever. You think if I just craft the best communication here, it's going to do a great job landing with the other person. But no matter how great I am at communicating, at saying things to you, I can't predict the way you'll interpret what I say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the brief back does really, really well, is it puts it out in the open so I can hear my own words repeated back to me, which is actually when I think great communication has occurred, right? Great communication doesn't end when the words leave my mouth. It ends when I hear my intent repeated back.
Yeah.
So it fixes this problem, but it brings up another problem. And that's, how do you take something designed for the military and plug it into your traditional office setting? And what I can tell you from experience is there are a heck of a lot of ways to do it poorly, and only a very small handful of ways to do a really great job at it. So the bad way is, hey, Aaron, can you tell me what I just told you? I want to make sure you were listening.
Yeah.
I'm an asshole. You don't want to work with me. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be great. It doesn't work very well. Again, I'm lucky I worked with a great team at the time. I tried a lot of these ways. Some of them bounced off people. Some of them got them upset. It's like, I told them I was working on this in advance, but like very lucky that nobody's threw a punch at me or anything like that. What I found is the rule for a brief back in an office is to keep it on yourself. So rather than, hey, I want to make sure you were listening, what I'll say instead is, hey, Aaron, can you let me know what you're taking away from this conversation? I want to make sure that I did a good job getting my point across to you. It's not about whether you listened well. It's not about how smart you are or anything like that. It's about my communication and whether I did a good job landing my point with you. And then you repeat it back, and I say, oh, perfect. We're on the same page. Let's go. Miscommunication eliminated. Or, geez, that's not what I meant. I actually meant a little bit differently over here in a material way. We talk about it quickly. Again, miscommunication eliminated. It takes like 15 seconds, and it can save you, if you do it, it can save you a full day every single week.
Yeah, I mean, I learned this from you also because I think coaches a lot say this is like, after I'm done with my spiel, I'll say, does that make sense? And most players will be like, yeah. And
that is the most common question. Does that make sense?
I've thought about this a lot when I heard you talk about this. I was like, yeah, okay. But then I go the next day at practice or the next game, and they're doing like a similar thing that I just talked about. And I'm like, but I told them not to do that, and they said it makes sense. And I'm like, oh, it did make sense to them. That's how they interpreted it. That's how they got it. I need to ask a better question that allows them to respond in a way like, hey, Jake, I know we just talked about this. Like, okay, what did you feel about that? Tell me what you think, whatever it is, right? Tell me like what the question you were trying to ask instead of, do you understand that? Yeah, I understand it. It makes sense in my brain to me, how I interpret it. So for me, when I heard you talk about that, that was like super powerful because coaches do that all the time. So thank you for that. I'm going to change that moving forward.
I'm glad to hear the story. Glad to hear it's helpful. And I think that is the misconception there is it's not about if understanding took place. It's about how understanding took place. What did you understand? Right? Because I can say a thing to you, like you just said, it makes perfect sense to me and it makes perfect sense to you. But our perfect senses are not connected.
Right.
And so in your situation, I think a question I get sometimes is like, well, how do I do this if we're working remotely? Sending somebody an email or a Slack message or a text message and asking them to repeat back what you just told them is silly because they're just going to copy and paste the same words.
Sure.
Right. What you want to do is you want to understand what they're going to do with the information. This you could probably use in your coaching as well. Is, rather than asking them to repeat the message back using the brief back, you could say, hey, I just want to make sure we're aligned. What are you thinking of doing next? Based on what I just told you. Right. And in your version, maybe it's like, I'm going to keep my elbow up when I'm at the plate because that's going to help me, not, I don't know what, whiff on the ball big giant time or pop it way up into the air.
Yeah.
Or if you're in a work situation, like I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z. You can tell very quickly, right? If you landed your message in the way that you intended, if the next couple of steps feel right to you, you'll know pretty much right away. I'm going to go and build this presentation. It's going to be awesome. 20 slides. I'm going to practice it. So I'm ready to deliver it on Friday. Whoa. I just needed you to write a really quick memo, right? Oh, great. Just saved a whole lot of time and frustration there when I don't get to give my presentation, even though I created the whole thing.
Yeah. Amazing. I'm going to slightly switch subjects here in a second because I can't have a conversation with you without talking about both of our sisters. But before we jump into that, is there anything else about the book that you really want people to know?
It's not boring. I hope. I think for me, the whole book is about how to enjoy your job more and do better at it along the way. And I really thought hard about how do I make this book enjoyable to read? It is about work. A lot of workbooks can be full of incredible information, but can be quite boring to read. I really tried my best to make the book an enjoyable read for folks. In some places, it's like corny and cheesy, and in others, I hope it hits the mark. But I was, very fortunate to work with one of the editors of Atomic Habits who like kicked my ass and taught me how to write better. And, I really thought a lot about, okay, people don't have a lot of time to read books. Every chapter I kind of thought about like the average reader should be able to read a chapter in under 15 minutes because that feels right. You can chunk it out that way. I thought a lot about how you don't need to be a deep expert in communication or prioritization. You just need to make enough progress I think about it like a Swiss Army knife, maybe. Like there are sharper knives in a Swiss Army knife, but if you can only take one tool into the woods, you bring a Swiss Army knife because it does the most stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I'm trying to get the book across, is like, if you're going to read one book, I would love people to pick up mine and give it the chance to be like the book that finds a way to have impact for you, because it covers off the most common challenges. So, it'll be very tactical. It'll give you some things to do. And I'm hoping you laugh at least one time, if not multiple times, as you work your way through it. We tried to get as much humor into the thing as possible.
Yeah. Well, that book and how to buy it, Your Grass is Greener, just linked below in the show notes. Click on it, and yeah, go there
Thank
now.
you.
So to sort of wrap up this conversation on a very personal note, like I mentioned, please, tell me about your sister Rachel and sort of the impact she had on your life, and
I mean,
still has.
I almost couldn't believe your story when I was reading it.
Dude, before you start, like when you sent me the initial email, I thought someone was sending an email about me.
Yeah,
And I was like, what is happening here? It was like weird deja vu moment. And then I kept reading through it and I was like, no, I got to fucking talk to this guy. Anyway,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt. Continue.
No, please. I mean, it's why I was so excited for the chat. It's one of these things where like worlds collide in a way you can't imagine. And, as I was thinking about launching the book, doing podcasts is something that I really wanted to do. I love talking to people. It gives me a good opportunity to talk about the book and also meet them. And that's great. And so I think about, what podcast do I want to be on? I do a bunch of research and I'm clicking through you. I'm like, it's uncanny. And so it's unfortunately uncanny, but it's uncanny nonetheless. So the like long and short is, I founded a bunch of companies, and I was at Airbnb in the early days, and I was building an AI startup back before it was like the coolest thing on the planet to be doing. And we had raised money and hiring people and pushing hard and lots of stress, and kind of really on the like, how fast can I run on the treadmill type thing. And one day, my parents went on vacation and my sister gave me a call. She went for her regular checkup. Doctor sent her to the emergency room right away. She's freaking out. I go down to the hospital, and it turns out she has a very late stage, very aggressive form of cancer. It was bad. I had to call my parents. I had to tell them to fly home. Easily the hardest phone call I've ever made in my life. And my sister passed away, within the year before she turned 40. And that's the thing that really gave me a shove in my life. And it's something that I struggled with. I still do to a certain extent, but she passed away, and I can tell you now that my life I feel better now than I did, in earlier versions of myself when she was here. And I used to feel bad about that because I how can that be true? I have so much guilt around it. Like, how can I actually feel that way? And I realized that that's actually doing a disservice to the gift that she's given me. And if I could change everything I've learned and everything that's come since then and give it back so that she would be here, I would do it in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. But I can't. And so the next best thing is, she shoved me down this path of, how are you living your life, and how do you want to be living your life, and how is that going to change things for you? And it's hard to describe. I lack the right word. And when I found out, your sister, and her name was also Rachel, and she passed away, what you don't know is my book's coming out on September 2nd. September 2nd would have been my sister's birthday, and I believe that your sister passed away on September 3rd. And so it's just connection
wild.
Points. The connection points are crazy.
Yeah. I have a lot of the same sentiments as you do. My sister ended her own life, so it's a little bit different in that regard. Mm-hmm. But I still feel like some of the similar things. Like, I have a hard time using the word gratitude.
Yeah.
But like, it's like the only word that like sort of summarizes it. Like, my life now is incredible. I'm getting married at the end of in September.
Congrats.
Like, I get to do this podcast for a job. Like, I feel like I'm in great health. My parents are in great health. I've got great friends. Like, I feel better now And that's the same reason, like, because I got shown the fragility and the preciousness of life. Because up until that point, my life was like, overall, my life has been amazing. I haven't gone through like an absurd amount of, unbelievable hardships like a lot of people have, except for sort of losing my sister, which put me on a different path than I think otherwise I would have been on. And so, yeah, there's appreciation for that fact. But like you said, I take her back in an instant to have another meal with her, to, have her meet my soon to be wife or my soon to be children or whatever the case may be. But there's still a sense of like a guiding light, maybe like a North Star that, she's pushing me towards. But grief is interesting. It hits you, at least it hits me in different ways, especially with my wedding coming up. I'm feeling a lot of like a dichotomy of emotions, like some sadness, some really excitement, all of that stuff. And so it's an interesting journey. And I mean, most people understand, what death feels like, especially at our age, but it's a little bit different, I think, with a sibling or someone you really, 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 really love. And it's also different, like when you get moved past it. Like I'm 6 years removed, and my feelings are totally different now than they were 2 or 3 years removed, when you feel like I was like in the fucking darkness.
Yeah.
And so therapy and support groups are all really valuable. They really helped me. I know they helped you as well, and so that's another plug for that. But yeah,
I mean, agree completely. And it's funny. Like, as you asked me the question, and as I was answering it, the word gratitude is on the tip of my tongue, and I'm like, I can't. That's not the word, right?
Yeah.
There's a missing functional word that I need, which is it kind of like I can talk around it, but I can't describe what the word is. I'm by no means grateful that my sister's not here,
right.
While being at the same time grateful for the lessons that I've learned. And I think trying to handle those is challenging. And I think for me, the thing I learned is I don't know how much death made sense to me. I understood it intellectually, and now I understand it on a level that's totally different, because for me, and something in my life, a thing happened that is completely out of what feels like the natural order of things. I think people are used to the idea that you get older and you die, and at some point that's going to happen to you, and parents and grandparents and what have you. For me, with my sister, she passed away before she was 40. Like, that kind of stuff's not, not supposed to happen. And I'm kind of stuck here now with, like, she met my youngest, so I'm very grateful for that. But he was, quite young. And sorry, she met my oldest, and he was still quite young. He was about 2 when she passed away. And my youngest will never meet her, and that's, again, struggle with all that kind of stuff. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of a motivation for some of the things I'm doing now, which is she's not here. And I'm kind of taking some of the things that I've learned and trying to put them out in the world as a way to pay forward, the time that she was here. And that just adds for me an additional layer of, I guess, fulfillment, like that I'm in a position that I can do these things, and I've learned these things, and I can put them out in the world. And it's accomplishing both, I hope, helping people, and, giving me a way to pay forward some stuff from her too. Is for that, I am grateful that I'm able to be in a position like that. So it's certainly a tough situation. It's funny, as I go through podcasts and talking about the book, it comes up, and sometimes I cry, and other times I'm able to talk about it, as I just did, where it might sound unemotional to folks. And like you said, grief's a process. I have days 5 years removed that are as sad as days that were the day after. And I have days that are different. It is what it is, and you feel what you feel. And I think what's great for you is you're coming up on the wedding, and, personally, I get worried if it's like you have something like a wedding coming up and that doesn't trigger some different emotions for you. And it's great. Kind of keeps you grounded, I think, in the right ways, and it keeps the memory alive, which is amazing. But congrats on the upcoming wedding.
Thank you. Yeah, September will be a big month for the both of us.
I mean, the marriage is hopefully it's a big party. Do you guys have a big plan?
Yeah. We have everything pretty much sorted. We already live together in a house, so like not much will change outside of that. Like, besides that, she takes my last name, which is fucking sweet, and I get to call her wife, which is awesome. Nice. But yeah, like we'll have like 157 people. We're getting married at a hotel in downtown Dallas, and don't worry, everyone listening, I'll do a recap episode on this podcast, and maybe I can finally convince my wife to be on an episode because she refuses to do so.
You just live stream the whole thing. I'm sure she would love that. It would be great.
Yeah. There will be some video crew there, so I'm sure I'll put it up on my YouTube channel at some point. But
honeymoon plans?
We want to go to Greece and Italy, not until summer of 2025. After summer baseball season, which sort of sometimes rules our life. Nice. But I'm playing in a men's league tournament in October, just in a couple months. And I told her that could be our honeymoon. Like, just come on and watch me play.
I'm sure that landed.
I mean, she's coming, but Jason, it's not a honeymoon. So
maybe, did she give you the brief? Like, are you trying to tell me that your baseball tournament is going to be our honeymoon? Is that what you're trying to say? Like,
she did give me the brief back. Nice. And I was like, yes, those are my words. You heard me correctly. But yeah, funny. So it's all good. Try. But dude, thank you for this chat. I loved it. People should definitely pick up the book. Anything else? Anywhere else people should go? Anything else you want them to know before we send off?
I would love folks to go check the book out at yourgrassisgreener.com. If you pick up a copy, it's kind of available like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, like wherever you tend to get books. But at yourgrassisgreener.com, you get a whole bunch of free bonuses too. Like everything that's mentioned in the book, there's kind of like a follow-on companion guide, so you can actually put these things into practice. So would love folks to just, if this sounded interesting, yourgrassisgreener.com, you can find links to buy the book there and get in touch with me. We'd love to hear what you think.
Amazing. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Aaron. And thanks to everybody who made it all the way to the end here with us. I know it's an investment in their time, and I hope it had something impactful you can go and try in your day-to-day.
Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.